bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It's October 2nd. It's a Wednesday. That means it's a Wall Pass Wednesday. You guys can join the conversation with us this morning on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. And it's the Wednesday before Decision Day in Major League Soccer. There's a lot of different storylines that will be unfolding on Sunday around the league. Eastern Conference playoffs not decided yet in terms of 2 through 7. Western Conference playoffs, you've still got 9 teams that could be in it by the end of the day. All kinds of chaos. If you have questions about any of that, please throw them our way on Twitter. If you have questions about Copa Libertadores last night, Champions League yesterday, the Diego Maradona documentary on HBO last night, whatever you want to get into, we are here for you this morning. You missed a good Copa Libertadores match last night, John, with some good drama in it. River gets the win over Boca in the first leg, 2-0. It's kind of what they had to do at a minimum to get to be in the driver's seat. I don't think they're in any way secure, but going to Boca in the second leg, they're in the driver's seat with a 2-goal lead. They looked like the better team. Boca came in too conservative, and they got punished for it.
And from all indications, as I was monitoring social media from where our folks at Wrestling Down Here were last night, it was as crazy as anticipated and expected. And
no, it was fine. I mean, it was fine. It wasn't like crazy when you're talking about Copa Libertadores. You've got to set a different expectation. It's not last year's final crazy, and that's good.
No.
That's a good thing. It was a big game. Yeah. That's all.
So I guess the way that I use that word, for me, it was the emotion that's attached and the rivalry and all that kind of stuff. But it sounds like the crowd from the brew house was enjoying 2 separate things, including yourself. But it's always fun for me to kind of step back a little bit and just see the emotion of something, even if I'm not there to watch it. And so looking at the way that everyone was responding and how things were breaking down, or just evolving, not breaking down, but how things were evolving last night. It sounded like it was a fun match to watch and be a part of and get ready for the second leg.
Yeah, it was a good one last night. Tonight you get the other semifinal. The 2 Brazilian teams face off, setting up for the 1-game final. And that's a little different in Copa Libertadores. It's something that I think you want to see MLS teams get to at some point, because as great as CONCACAF Champions League is, the Libertadores is a whole nother level and a whole nother world. It's Gremio and Flamengo tonight at 8:30. That's the other semifinal. There's always talk about Mexican clubs coming back into the Libertadores. They've been there before. It's been a few years now since they've been in it. I think they would love to get back. I honestly think CONMEBOL would like to have them back. But I think now with the partnership with Liga MX, with Major League Soccer, I don't know if the Mexican clubs go back on their own. I think MLS clubs would be part of that conversation. And it would be incredibly difficult because of the travel. It would be difficult because of the level of competition. But the boost that it would give the game and the boost that I think it would ultimately give the league could be worth it if everyone can figure out how to make it work. And when you're dealing with CONCACAF, CONMEBOL, all of these leagues, figuring out the best way to make something work is never guaranteed. That's pretty common when you look at the history of these organizations. But I'm hopeful that one day we see some form of play between Major League Soccer clubs and South American clubs, not friendlies, official play. I think it'd be a pretty amazing thing for all involved.
I was going to ask you, and you addressed it a little bit there, but the question that popped into my head as you were breaking things down and a possible future that folks would like, how do you think MLS teams would fare?
I mean, we're talking about a huge difference in level and history and expectation. So it's going to take a minute. I mean, we're not seeing Major League Soccer teams on the whole evenly fare with Liga MX teams yet. And Liga MX teams were very good in this competition, but not dominant in it. So, I mean, that's where you're standing right now. Can they compete? Yeah, I think they can. I think in the group stage they can compete. I think there's a huge difference when you're talking about Boca and River and Grêmio and Flamengo and a couple other Brazilian teams and a couple other Argentine teams. The top teams in a given year from Colombia, from Ecuador, from Chile, from Peru can cause a lot of problems for MLS teams as well, but that's a little more of a level comparison. It's something that I think what would happen is they would struggle to compete at the beginning because of the experience, not because of the quality. And then you would start to see things from the quality perspective be a little bit closer than you might think. And this is all assuming that MLS continues growing at the pace that it's growing at now. If you get a change in the ownership of the league wanting to push more money into it and invest more, if you get the CBA expanding that pool of money and you've got more money to give players and then you get better players and then you take a bigger jump, then it's a different conversation. But we were having this conversation during the match last night about MLS and where it is and where it can be. I think the first step to being one of the biggest leagues in the world, which is the stated goal. You know, we're not pulling things out of the air. This is what Major League Soccer said. It's what Don Garber said. You want to be one of the biggest leagues in the world. And you should want to be that. That should be your vision. There's nothing wrong with that. I think people who mock that statement, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with saying that or thinking that, because yes, it is possible. Yes, that should be your goal. That should be your vision. That should be what you're striving for. To get there, you've got to be the top league in this hemisphere. And you're not there yet. Mexico has beaten you in competition consistently. Brazil is a bigger league. Brazil is the biggest league in this hemisphere right now. Argentina is very top-heavy in terms of quality, just sheer talent on the field. Boca, River, a couple others are just a big step above. But the rest of the league, not so much. And I think MLS is ahead of the rest on the whole. On the whole. Maybe not every individual team, but on the whole, yes. I think they're better than Colombia, Costa Rica, Chile, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, Paraguay. The rest of South America, I think MLS is in that 4 spot. In maybe 5, maybe Colombia is a little ahead, maybe, and I'm not sure of that. But the gap is not dramatically huge. I think before you get to the 2026 World Cup, MLS can be in a position where it is the biggest league in this hemisphere. And that needs to be the first step. When you think about like a vision statement, and that's probably Don Garber saying that we're underranking MLS. When you talk about that vision statement, you want it to be as big and bold as you can be. And you want to have goals along the way to get there. That first goal is to be the biggest league and the strongest league and the best league in this hemisphere. And you're not there yet. And I think one of the ways you get there is through competition and figuring out how to create competition with the South American clubs that you want to measure yourself against.
And, you know, when you mentioned 4th or 5th, that falls in line with where I think we've pretty much figured out where MLS is on a worldwide scale. I think you'd said, but top 10 or top 12, right?
I think they're more than top 12. I mean, people will argue with it, and it's hard. It's hard without seeing comparison. It really is, without seeing competition where, okay, you can compare this club, this league, and that league. I think your biggest league in the world is the Premier League on all fronts. And next to our La Liga and Bundesliga. And then it feels like there's a bit of a step down to Serie A and Liga. MLS can get into a conversation where they're at the France-Italy level, I think, within 10 years, if they do things correctly and they take advantage of the bump that you will get after the 26 World Cup. I think that's a realistic thought pattern, because the other ones that are in that conversation, I think MLS has the stability that really few leagues in the world have. And you have the steady growth that not many leagues have. It feels like a lot of leagues and a lot of issues are dragging things down, whereas MLS is continuing to steadily grow. Not expansion. I'm just talking in quality and money coming in and all of it. It's been steady. That's been the plan, and it's worked. It was needed. Now the question that I think owners need to have with themselves and with each other as a group is this the time? Is this the opportunity to kick the investment up a greater notch than the standard increase to get that payoff? Do you feel like everything is in place to kick that salary cap, that player investment up a good bit, and then take advantage of it? Are you in a position to take advantage of having that? And that's the question. I don't have the answer. I don't know. I mean, we see things in Atlanta where, yes, Atlanta could be a bigger team. There are things in place that it could be a bigger club. It's ready for it. Is the rest of the league ready for that? I don't know. I think some markets are, some probably aren't, and how many are is the question. And that's not something that we see easily. I mean, that's not something we see. We don't see, staff sizes. We don't see marketing budgets. We don't see what the penetration is in each market. We don't know all of that offhand. I think there's still room to grow in that. And is it maybe one more batch of steady growth before you start to dramatically increase it before that World Cup? Do you have to wait until after that World Cup to get the big increase? I don't know, but I think those are the conversations that are going to inform this upcoming CBA, because that plays into it on the ownership side. I think there will be increases. I would never expect there to not be increases in spending in this league from the ownership. But how much is the question? And it feels like there are some owners and some clubs that want to kick that up a larger step, and others who want to stay either where they are now, which isn't going to happen, or very steady growth. And that it's not infighting. I think it's a time to look at one another and say, are we ready for this? And where is the overall group? It's time to be introspective here. And can the league take advantage of that growth now, or do they still need to get a few things right internally to be able to do that? I don't know. It's a tough call. It's not an easy decision.
And to your point, I think it is a case-by-case basis when it comes to the growth curve in a particular market. I mean, we're seeing in Chicago, they're leaving Bridgeview. They're coming downtown. They're putting themselves in an American football venue and giving yourself that opportunity to be seen by a boatload of eyes. In Columbus, you have the new ownership group with the Haslams, and we've seen what they've invested with the Browns, and we see what they're wanting to do with the new stadium, and you see with Miami, obviously, with all of the ideas that they have going on, that, coming into the league, they have this thought pattern of how they want to be. And so, you're seeing these individual elements coming through. And then obviously, there are certain cities where you're sitting there and you're going, okay, where are you guys when it comes to growth? And I think that's why I think, honestly, there will be some kind of growth. It won't be exponential. It should be just, something of a stage. But when you're looking at certain markets and certain teams, you're going, okay, where are you in this growth curve? And they might be further down the line, but you're hoping that they're going to want to see where the league can go and see where the league can be and continue to invest in a level that is comfortable for them, so they're not overextending themselves in a sense that could be detrimental to the overall growth of the league.
Five Stripe Daily with a Wall Pass Wednesday question that we're going to get here in segment number 1. If you could add one former/retired player to Atlanta United as they were as a teenager to the current squad, who would you add?
Wow.
Who would you add?
Wow, I have no idea. I have to think about that.
No. Gut reaction. Who would you add? Anybody.
I mean, for me, it'd be like Maradona with the current discussions we've been having. A Maradona or a Messi?
Messi. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't have the problems you would with Diego Maradona. If you can see the future, no, you're not going to add Diego Maradona to your squad because nobody wants to deal with that drama and craziness. And asking specifically about Atlanta United, you can add them as a teenager. Messi was breaking through as a teenager. You know, is it a position that you really need as much? No. I mean, obviously, you'd love to have Lionel Messi. Don't get me wrong, but a player breaking through as a teenager that I would love to add to the current squad would be a player like Frank Rijkaard, who came up as that holding midfielder. He could be that 6, but a guy who could play, a guy who could drive forward, a guy who could drop into the back when needed. That would be a game changer for this current group, I think. And if you had him coming up as a teenager, getting into his prime, yeah, that'd be a huge change to the current group.
Daly said Gattuso.
Yes, I was getting there. His said Gennaro Gattuso, which is kind of the same thought process. I would go a little bit more with the ball playing central mid, and Gattuso was good on the ball. I think Rijkaard was better. 5-Star Daly also hit the line. Sometimes maybe good.
Sometimes maybe
not. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just going to stick with Maradona or Messi? You're just going to go with the best, not gonna go anywhere else on it?
I mean, I'm trying to think of youngins that you sit there and you're kind of progressing. And see, you went Rijkaard, and for me, this is thought, and I haven't had enough Mountain Dew to think yet. And that's why I went straight off the top and headed right to Mount Rushmore. And it's like, yep, go ahead and pull them in.
Ay, Dios mío. All right, we're going to take a quick break so John can drink some Mountain Dew, and we'll talk a little bit about the Maradona documentary because you guys have had a couple things to say about it from some of you who watched last night.
Yes, they have.
It is on HBO Go. It's on HBO Now. However, you can get to HBO. You can watch it. There is a free trial, by the way, of HBO
there you go.
Now, the over-the-top one. I think it's a week's free trial. So however you got to get to it, definitely must watch. It lived up to the hype for me. We'll talk about it in the next segment right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here. October 2nd edition of the show. It's a Wall Pass Wednesday. You guys can take the conversation wherever you want. I'd love to hear the listeners' thoughts on that last question about what teenager in the history of the game would you add to the current squad? And we were talking about it offline. I think you've got to think about this in multiple levels. Like John said, Gerd Mueller, for example, one of the greatest goal scorers in the history of the game. I don't think he still has records for Germany. I think Miroslav Klose broke most or all of them. But that would be a position that I would not add because you have Joseph Martinez in line. So you're adding another forward to a spot that you don't need another forward. So I think you're thinking about a position where either you're going to need to replace it now or very soon, and somebody who can be in that role for quite a while. That's why I went with the 6, because to add a player like Rijkaard or, as Five Stripe Daily said, Gattuso, you would be adding somebody who could be there for 10 years at a minimum and hold that role down and grow into it a little bit, because you have people who can play the role right now, but they're going to get pushed by the up-and-coming teenager. I think Rijkaard would be that guy. That's why I would go in that direction. That's why even, Messi, you'd obviously make room for him, but is he the greatest need right now? Your attack, I don't think, is a problem, and I don't project it to be a problem anytime soon. It's other spots that I think are more useful. But I'd love to see how you guys take it. That's just my thinking on the question. The question, I retweeted it from my account, Longshoe. We'll get it from Soccer Down here as well. It's a good one from Five Stripe Daily on a Wall Pass Wednesday.
Yes, and the other thing last night, where you were locked in, and by our DMs, you were locked in for quite some time.
I stayed up very late to watch this because I was at the brew house hanging out with folks. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Howard, for coming down, hanging out, watching the Libertadores game. There were a bunch of people there actually watching the game. It was fun. Got back, took the dog for a walk, got everything situated, and then stayed up very late watching the Diego Maradona documentary on HBO. And if you've listened to the show for any period of time, you know that the reason that I am sitting here talking about soccer with you guys this morning is because of Diego Maradona. I saw him in the 1986 World Cup for Argentina. I'd played one season of soccer at the Clayton County YMCA and liked it. Didn't have any kind of reference point for what soccer was because we didn't have a professional team. It wasn't on TV. Had played it in gym class, went and played it at the YMCA because I didn't want to play baseball that spring, and I'd played basketball at the Y. Had a really good coach who kind of fostered that love of the game with me. And that summer, the World Cup was on TV. Not all the games. Commercial breaks. It was on ESPN and NBC. Both they kind of just picked up games as they went. And it wasn't the England game that I saw. I didn't see that until later on. It was the Belgium game that I will always remember, the semifinal, where Maradona scored twice, 2 very different goals, and you could just tell. I mean, if you knew anything about sports, and I was 9 years old, I didn't know that much, but you can see a star. You can understand like a guy who's carrying a team and is the man in that team and in that tournament, and that was Diego Maradona. His performance in that World Cup is about as good as it gets in a tournament. I don't know if it's ever been equaled or could be equaled because he was at the peak of his powers, and that was also the time that he was at Napoli in Serie A, and he carried them to 2 league titles, won the season right after winning the World Cup, which is probably one of the greatest years in soccer history, to win a World Cup with Argentina, who was not anywhere near a favorite in that tournament, barely qualified, and then to win Napoli's first Serie A title when I think they'd finished third the year before, and they'd never been a contender before that. That's a pretty amazing year. But as a kid, I didn't really know the other stuff because, I mean, he's playing in Italy. Like, we'd see a game from Serie A occasionally on some, like, financial news network that would turn into a sports network on the weekends.
FNN Score.
Yeah, and they'd pull up Serie A games. It'd always be Napoli, and it'd always be Maradona, and it had no, like, TV guide or anything to know when it was coming, so you're just randomly checking it on a weekend hoping that you get a Maradona match, and then occasionally you would. And 1990 World Cup, maybe it's an even greater performance in completely different ways to carry Argentina to that final because they were past it, and he was injured, and they were not very good, and somehow they just dragged themselves to the final, and then it all fell apart. And that's when everyone worldwide saw the fall. It was that next season was his last in Italy. That's when everything changed. And I thought the documentary was amazing, first off. It was all this footage that Maradona's agent at the time had filmed for a potential documentary, and then Maradona fired him, funding ran out, they had nothing set up to actually do anything with this footage, and it all comes together, I think, for this documentary in the last maybe couple of years. It's mostly about his time in Italy. It touches on everything else, but the footage that just blows your mind is mostly from his time in Naples. And I've said it before, I'll still hold to it. I don't think there is any type of comparison for who Diego Maradona was and still is in Argentina in soccer, and not quite worldwide, but in that ballpark, but definitely in Argentina. There's no comparison. Like, you would not have seen the scenes that you saw around Maradona at this time in Italy. That wasn't the life Michael Jordan had. That wasn't the life that Tom Brady has. It wasn't the life that Joe Montana had. It wasn't the life that, Willie Mays had. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. And this was a guy who eventually, like, could not handle that life. And I don't know if anybody could. And he wasn't a saint by any means. And when you're a young kid from the streets of Buenos Aires and you're the greatest soccer player in the world and you become the biggest star in the world and you happen to go to a city that has a bit of organized crime, just a little bit, when the first question in the press conference welcoming you to Naples is asking, do you understand about the Camorra? Do you understand that they control everything? That's the first question to Diego Maradona at the press conference to introduce him. And the president of the club kicked the guy out and went on a long speech. That's day one. And you take Maradona at 24 and becoming the biggest star in the world. Hopefully that's not who I think it is, Colin. I'm going to assume they don't have the number.
Is that not Maradona?
No, it's not.
It's anonymous, apparently.
Anyway. 24 years old, you're going into that. You're becoming the biggest player in the world. You get bigger when you win the World Cup. You get bigger when you lead Napoli to a title. And you don't have any makeup. You don't have any of the upbringing, life, personality to handle it. And when it comes crashing down, it comes crashing down. And it starts to come crashing down when Maradona's Argentina knocks Italy out of the World Cup in the semifinals in Naples, which is the craziest thing ever. I can't remember who it was who said it in the documentary. The fact that the Italian Federation allowed the scheduling to even create that possibility of Argentina and Italy in Naples, because Naples always felt separate from the rest of Italy. And that's something that is touched on in the piece that was really powerful. And you get Maradona, the greatest son of Naples at this time, leading his country in to play against Italy and playing off of that and saying some things that he should not have said, that he was never forgiven for. And when he knocks Italy out, all bets are off. All the protection that he had for his life, all the people looking the other way for the lifestyle that he had, well, they stopped looking the other way and they started looking closer. And it's in that next year that he gets, there's wiretaps. He's caught with cocaine through that. He's caught with ties with organized crime with that. He gets a drug test and gets suspended for the longest sentence. It might still be ever, but it's one of the longest ever for, it wasn't performance-enhancing drugs. It was cocaine. 15 months. 15 months suspended at that point. All of that came after Argentina knocked Italy out of the World Cup. It's an amazing documentary that doesn't cover his whole life, but covers the most important part. And it shows you why everything else was what it was coming in to his time in Naples, and then a pretty good explanation of what's happened since. And it's an amazing watch. It's 2 hours. It's absolutely worth it.
And you said in our discussion about it that it really should be 10. But and this is one of the things that I've learned, since we've done the show over the last couple of years, but before we did the show and we knew each other, all I have to say to you is Diego Maradona. And then you just go. And for me, it's fun to listen to, your knowledge base on him specifically, and just the storytelling that you have about Maradona and how he's impacted your life. For me, it's one of the cooler listens from mentioning just 2 words to you, and then you're off and running. And for me, I just think it's fun to hear how someone has been as integral a part of your life, of your soccer life, that Maradona has, just to hear everything that you get to discuss about him. And I figured that all I had to say is Diego Maradona documentary, go. And we were going to have this segment.
I love that a couple different things that came out of this that I think encapsulate Maradona at this time and in his life. Argentine journalist Daniel Arcucci says that Maradona in Naples is the story of his life. Rebel, cheat, hero, God, because he's treated as godlike. I think there actually is a church of Maradona that was half joke and half real in Argentina. His personal trainer said he made a really big point about the difference between Diego and Maradona. And Diego was a kid, and a sweet kid, and a nice kid, and a very affectionate kid. And Maradona was the character that was created to deal with this life, where it was Diego Maradona at 15 years old who became the breadwinner for the family. It was Maradona who, bought a house for his family. They were living in slums in Buenos Aires. Slums might be a kind way to put it. He dealt with pressure from 15 that none of us really understand or could. It's impossible to. And it was almost that alter ego of Maradona, the confident one, the cocky one, the one who could never admit that he was wrong, the one that could never show weakness, that he created to deal with it. And it became a problem. And the trainer said that, I think for Diego, I would walk miles to help Diego, but for Maradona, I wouldn't take a step. Paraphrasing, but it's along those lines.
Yeah.
because his time in Naples is where Diego really retreated into the background and Maradona became who he was in totality. And it's not, honestly, until much later on, after more drug issues, after health issues, after comeback attempts that failed, after things constantly falling apart, near-death experiences, that you start to see Diego a little bit more. And there was a great piece from Brian Phillips yesterday that I retweeted about Maradona, and I thought he kind of touched on this in a lot of ways. The introduction of Maradona at Gimnasia, you saw both at the same time in a lot of ways. You saw Diego and you saw Maradona. You saw Diego as he is getting out of a golf cart in the stadium of packed people, chanting his name, singing for him, so happy that Maradona's part of their club, and it's almost like, Diego is blown away by the whole thing. And then as he starts to gain a little bit of strength, and this is, Diego Maradona had knee surgery fairly recently. I mean, he's not walking well. He's not in great health. I think that's a pretty well-known fact by now. As he started to gain some strength, you saw Maradona come out a little bit, not completely, but some. But it was mostly Diego. And I think that's what you're seeing now. Our friend Gustavo in Buenos Aires had a really good point when Maradona was announced with Gimnasia. Is Maradona going to save Gimnasia from getting relegated? Probably not. They're just not a good team. I mean, it could be anybody. They just don't have the talent. They might pull a few wins. They could barely survive. Is he going to dramatically change Gimnasia? Probably not. Is he going to save them? No. But might the process of him being there save him? Yeah, it could. It really could, because he's now come through all of this stuff, and you get a great glimpse of, I think, the worst of it in the documentary. But it's not a documentary that's trashing him in any way. I mean, it's sympathetic, but it's reasonable in the sympathy that it generates for Maradona from the viewer, which is the way you have to play this one, I think. But I think coming through all of that and trying to do things now and get back into the game and be involved, you do feel sympathy. And you are seeing the boy come back out in Diego, and it feels very different. You want it to work out well for him. I do anyway. And I think all of Argentina does, and I think a lot of people do. I mean, all those things that Arcucci said, rebel, cheat, hero, God, they're all there. They're all part of his life. They're all part of the things that fueled him on to have, in my mind, not the greatest career in soccer history, because it wasn't long enough. And he blew it in the biggest moment in 90. Well, honestly, he blew it through his time in Naples, but he was protected, and it didn't blow up on him. But after that, he was bouncing around. He played at Sevilla for a year. He played a few games with Newell's. He went to the World Cup in '94, played a couple of games, and he's popped for PEDs. He's booted out of that. He makes a return with Boca Juniors a couple different times. I mean, it's fits and starts. But his career pretty much ended in Naples, and that was very early. He didn't have the length of the career of many other greats in the game, so he doesn't have the greatest career in the history of the sport. But he had, I think, the greatest short run in the history of the sport. And I think he's the most talented player to ever touch a soccer ball. I really think that's the case. So, you look at all of that, and you look at his life, and you look at him coming from absolutely nothing and becoming the greatest player in the world, and then it all falling apart. And now he's still here, and he's still trying to do something, and it's like you want it. You want Gimnasia. I mean, I want Gimnasia to stay up. I want him to have a role in that, and that would maybe, like Gustavo said, maybe that would save him in a lot of different ways.
And I understand, obviously not to the extent that Maradona has lived his life, but I understand the notion of being both Diego and Maradona. From my time covering college football and pro football, and I guess it started because I covered Deion Sanders as a collegiate athlete. I understood the difference between Dion and Primetime. I knew who Primetime was, but I also knew who the father of Deandra was at the same time at a very young age. So I understand that dynamic and everything that, but once again, obviously not to the extent of Maradona, but the demands on your life, the demands on yourself, the demands on who you are, who you think you should be, who you think you should be in public, who that persona should be, all those things. But to hear it through your prism about Maradona, I think that honestly, if you're someone who's not even necessarily the largest soccer fan in the world, I think that you can watch the documentary and understand what's going on. You can empathize with and you can sympathize with both Diego and Maradona and their stories through what we've seen.
Yeah, if you follow sports, if you just enjoy documentaries, I mean, I think if you're listening to this, you obviously have an affinity for soccer, so you're going to get into it on that side of it. But if you like documentaries about people, and I think specifically kind of tragic figures, even if the tragedy is if they're of their own making in some ways, not all, but some, it's just a fascinating look, and I think they really nailed all of the different elements of what makes Maradona, because you feel sympathy, you feel anger at him for being stupid and throwing it away. You're blown away by the talent. You're blown away by the reaction to his talent. I mean, the whole opening sequence with driving to the stadium in Naples for his unveiling, and just the chaos on the streets, the chaos in the stadium. I mean, they're in the press room, which is just this tiny room, like underneath part of the stand, and people like know where it is, and they're chanting for Diego like through the grates in the ceiling, and it's packed, and the press officer for Napoli is like telling people that he'll shut the press conference down if they don't back up, and people just start laughing at him. It's absolute madness. And then he goes out in the field and waves and jogs and says a couple things and juggles a ball, and that was what kicked it off. And it's crazy. It's a really well done piece. I mean, the footage they have, and that's what makes it, is you've got all this footage from the 80s that is unbelievable stuff. I mean, some of the Serie A footage from that time, it's incredible. I mean, great skill from Diego, but also just seeing what the Italian league was like in the late 80s and hearing some of what it was like. The Juventus fans and the chants at the Napoli players and fans, oh my goodness. I mean, you watch that and you get a little bit of an understanding about why we keep pointing out these issues in Italy at the moment, because they keep coming up because they've always been there. And it's crazy, and that was the environment it was at that time. Highly recommend it. Read the piece that I tweeted yesterday, too, if you're interested for more background. It's an unbelievable story. I mean, there's just no comparison. There's absolutely no comparison. I mean, I get the Dion and the Primetime idea, and to an extent, sure, because Primetime was the public persona, but I think Maradona becoming Diego's public persona was far more of a defensive move than Primetime felt more calculated and a way to get more attention and a marketing move, whereas Maradona becoming Maradona was to survive. Because I think, honestly, at his heart, he's a shy little boy from the streets. And all this was too much. And he wouldn't have survived otherwise. And that's when Maradona kicked in and carried him through it. It's a wild story. HBO, it's on demand. It's absolutely one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And I think we have a few tweets about it. We'll hit those before we go to break.
All right, so let's see what folks were. No, Dan Murphy, going all the way back to before the show this morning, he says, note to P.T. Martinez, quote, I was dead, exhausted, but the whole of the German defense was exhausted too. And in the middle of all that chaos, the number 10 is the player that needs to show himself, end quote. D.A. Maradona. Go make your moment, PT. Hashtag Wall Pass Wednesday.
Pitty's been making his moment. I do push back a little bit, Dan, that Pitty has not been making moments. Pitty has been playing very well as of late. I think it's a little harsh. And I also think that when Diego's talking about the number 10, he's talking about himself. Like it becomes not just the number 10 as a player or as a type of player. Like it's a little bit of that whole religion of Maradona. You know, El Diaz is Diego. That's Maradona that he's talking about there, and that's what I think when he's saying it. It's more of this is when I have to be the guy. I have to do this. I have to make this happen. I think Pitty, though, has been playing very well recently and creating a number of chances recently. And that's not even to say it was bad before. It's better now. It's honestly since... I'll maybe go back to the Seattle match because I thought he was good there. He had an assist. Since that one, that's July 14th. What, we're talking 2.5 months? He has, I believe, he has 4 natural assists. I think he has a couple more secondary assists. He has 2 goals. He's created a slew of chances. I think Pitty is becoming that guy. I think he is, and I think he's going to need to be in the postseason. We do get update this morning that Joseph Martinez is training with Atlanta United. Is he going to be 100%? I think that's a big ask, especially this Sunday. Postseason, Joseph, you'd have to lock him up somewhere to have him not play in the postseason. But will he be the Joseph that we know? It might take him a minute. And that's going to mean that Pitty and Barco are going to have to step up, and especially Pitty, because there's expectations there in a big way.
We've also had some folks chiming in this morning about your picking up the teenager and what teenager they would want to help out Atlanta United. John Nason says, teenager to add, yes, he's a striker, but a young Michael Owen was electric and scored everything in the box. Very Joseph-esque.
Yeah, but that's why I wouldn't pick him. And that's my thought process. As a teenager, yeah, Owen, when he broke through, good grief. But where would he go in this team? Like, you'd probably throw him out wide because you're not going to sit Joseph. And then Owen's not going to play, and he's not going to turn into Michael Owen. So if you throw him out wide, can he be effective? You'd go to a 4-3-3 if you're going to force him in, and you're going to play him off on the right side, and he played there coming up. He's not going to take it to the end line. He's going to cut inside, but he's not going to turn into Michael Owen in that role because Joseph is there. You know, and then you're going to get to a point that you're going to have to make a decision, and I don't think Owen would have had the time to play to keep him and move Joseph. That's why when you're thinking about this, think a little bit strategically about it. Not just great teenage players, but great teenage players in the context of this team. That's the way I took the initial question. If it's just great teenagers that you've enjoyed watching and know what they come into, that's a different conversation. And if you want to take it that way, go ahead. I'm looking at it more from the overall like depth chart and how it plays out.
Kefsey says that his head went to Roberto Carlos for some reason.
That's a good one, actually, because that's a position that is a little bit different conversation. Now, you do have George Bello on the outside, who is also a teenager. And that would be part of it. So, is that a concern? Could be. But Roberto Carlos is one of the best ever outside backs in the game. Unbelievable player. I don't know if you saw it recently. They showed a video that I think he had done either at home or locally of him still showing his skills. He's 46 now. He's still got it. Like, is he going to play? No. But he's still got that talent that's incredible. And he's a left back who just loves to bomb forward. He would as a teenager, yes, he would have displaced Bello, and then you'd be moving Bello into a different position, or you'd be moving him to another club. And those are the things that come up when you get into this conversation. So that's where it gets a little tricky. We're going to take a quick break, come back, and wrap up hour number 1 right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Final segment, hour number 1, Soccer Down here, October 2nd edition. Mike Conti will be joining us in the next segment. Stoppage time today at 2 o'clock, our last one of the regular season. We will get you caught up on everything from pre-decision day and then looking ahead to decision day. Atlanta and New England on the weekend. What else do we have on the Twitter timeline, John?
We've had more than one person recommend perhaps a young Frank DeBoer to be added to the roster.
It's a really good one, actually. It's a very, very good one because you're talking about one of the best ball-playing center backs of the probably modern era would be a fair way to put it. So, yeah. You get a young Frank DeBoer coming up and easing into this team, playing in the grouping of center backs that you have currently with a veteran in Michael Parkhurst in his final year, a player in his prime, I would say, in Leandro Gonzalez-Perez, and a young player who is still getting towards his prime in Miles Robinson, and then you add a teenage Frank DeBoer into that. That's great, I think, differentiation in the ages and in the development cycles. And yeah, that's actually a great call. I didn't think of that one straight away. That's a great call.
Jim Lepp says it's an easy one. We've been missing the transmission since Miggy left. The only Pele. Transition. Since Miggy left, the only Pele fit strategically, and sorry, Jason, the GOAT.
No. Hold on. They don't have to say sorry. I've never said that Pele wasn't the GOAT. The GOAT is the greatest of all time, and that would be for the whole career. Pele had a better career. But Pele never had a run like Diego Maradona did in the late 90s, or in the late 80s, sorry. I don't think he hit that level, but he was consistently for, we're talking from 17 until almost 35, 36. The last year with the Cosmos, he was a little more of a passenger, and let's be real. The NASL wasn't the same level as Santos was in their heyday in Brazil. But you're talking almost 20 years of excellence. Maradonna's nowhere near that. Maradona was a comet, a cosmic kite, as the great Argentine announcer said. Cosmic kites don't fly forever. And Pelé was a player who could. But again, like, Pelé's not a transition guy. Like, he's not a Miguel Almirón. So if you're looking for somebody in that kind of role as a teenager coming up, that's different. I got to think on that one. Pelé's not that exactly. So I get what you're saying, and I agree with the GOAT comment for sure. But Lionel Messi is going to have an argument about the GOAT comment too.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the World Cup, then that's going to be the mark that everyone will put against Lionel Messi. But as a career, I think it's pretty hard to touch what Lionel Messi's done at the club level. I'll have to think on the transition one as a better replacement directly for Miguel, if that's where you want to go.
Jorge B. says, Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima, a.k.a. El Fenomeno, in my humble opinion, the best number 9 ever.
It's definitely possible, but then that's another one where you're running into the roadblock of Joseph if you're thinking about this from a strategic standpoint. Do you want to have Fenomeno popping up and have Joseph in that spot? That's tough. That's very, very difficult. I would go a different position because of that. But if you were able to get him as a teenager and have him for an extended period of time, incredible. I think he was the perfect combination of skill, physicality, speed, power that we've ever seen in the game.
See, when these names come across on a question like this, I know it doesn't translate well to radio, but I just like to sit back and I like to hear your response, especially when someone hits a note and you're off and running. Joe Bost says, since he's kind of new history-wise, how about at Boca Boca 3?
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about maybe the greatest American center back in the history of the national team program. Maybe. Easily in the conversation, easily among the top couple. And it's another one. You get him as a teenager, that would have been, instead of him going to college, you would have had him develop as a professional, and he could have ended up being even better. And especially if you get teenage Bocanegra learning from the combination of Parkhurst and Leandro Gonzalez Perez and coming up, younger than Miles Robinson, that's another great spot. And when you get into the strategy of the roster build, that's a great spot to look at because of where the ages of the players currently in it are. And a teenager would be a great fit at that. Like, a teenager is going to become one of the greatest. It's a great fit. Yeah, Bocanegra is a great call there. And he would fit, too. He would absolutely fit into the style of play. Let's take a break. Let's get Mike Conti on the line. We'll talk to him about the news on Joseph Martinez and everything else, looking ahead to Decision Day right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Apple Linsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back, Soccer Down Here, October 2nd. It's a while past Wednesday. We've got a couple questions on the board. We'll get to those a little deeper as we go. Add some more to it. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here if you have any questions for this guy, Mike Conti. What's up, Mike?
What's going on, guys?
Not much. I'm not going to knock a chair over this morning like I did on Sunday.
Oh, man. I'll tell you. Clement Diop. Unbelievable. Does it feel to you guys like more often than not it's an opposing goalkeeper standing on his head against this team? Clement Diop, Maxime Crepeau in Vancouver, and that's one you still won. I mean, Zach Steffen obviously being a notable example from the playoffs 2 years ago. I mean, I feel like more often than not, even Sean Johnson's had a couple. Luis Robles has had a couple. It just feels like for whatever reason, when the league comes up with its Save of the Year nominees, more often than not, it's a save on an Atlanta United shot. And maybe it's just bad luck. I don't know. But, that was one of those, the Tito shot in stoppage time. Jason and I have the perfect angle. We're right behind it. And you can see the curl on the ball. You can see it's going to go in the net. And Diop kind of just reflexively with his offhand in a natural position, the ball just kind of hit his hand. Otherwise, it's going in because his hand was just naturally in the right place. I don't think he meant to have it there. It was just part of his body doing whatever it does. So crazy. But, look, the draw was as good as a win as far as the overall scheme of the Eastern Conference race is concerned. You lost your shot at number one on Wednesday when you lost to New York City. The best you can get is 2, and by drawing and with Philadelphia losing, really it doesn't change much in the grand scheme of things. It eliminates one of the paths where if you played 2, if Philadelphia had a draw on Sunday, you could have still been okay. But I mean, of all the ways that you're going to get the number 2 seed, you're in most cases, you're going to have to win on Sunday. So the difference between a draw and a win really isn't that big.
And you get the opportunity to do it in your place against New England, who, if math serves, and then one of the different permutations could end up being your first-round opponent all over again. And we got news this morning from Doug Robertson of the AJC that Joseph is back out practicing. All of these things in play with what we saw in Montreal. Do you let Joseph get healthy? Do you put him in the 18? What do you think?
I think you put him in the 18. I don't think you start him, and I think you're super careful about it. Jeff Lorenowitz had a really interesting interview on 92.9 The Game this morning. He did not sound thrilled about the idea of having to play New England back-to-back, even with the international break kind of breaking all this up. He didn't sound very thrilled about it, and it does sound a little not ideal. But then again, this is something that you would do in a 2-leg format in the playoffs, so maybe you treat this as leg 1 and your playoff game is leg 2, and you have the advantage of playing at home. So I don't know. I mean, John, it's hard to know. Joseph's such a tough guy. I think we've been given so little information on what the injury actually is and how Joseph is actually feeling. And I don't think Joseph's going to be made available to the media this week. So I'm at peace with whatever they decide. You don't want to risk Joseph in a game where worst case you lose and you end up the 3 seed at the cost of losing him for the postseason. So I would be super careful.
Yeah, I'm with Jeff on this. I don't like to see a team twice in the spot because it's just not easy to beat a team back to back like that. You're gonna pick up things from game one, and when you're dealing with a manager like Bruce Arena, he's a savvy guy. He's not gonna just play it out and not look at the tape going into the second time they face each other in a knockout game. And he's a manager too that would have zero problem coming in a knockout game and getting every bus in front of the goal and slashing tires and making it a just hellish atmosphere for Atlanta.
Well, what's New England under Bruce Arena, like 4-2-10 or something? Like they've played an absurd amount of draws.
Yeah, I think there's a few more wins early on, but yeah, a ton of draws, especially lately. They haven't lost since August 3rd.
Right, but they've only won once, and I think that was Sunday.
That was the second one, yeah.
Or the second one, yeah. So, I mean, that part scares you a little bit. But what I would also say is, as much of a disadvantage as it could be for Atlanta United to have to play a team twice and allow them to get some things on you, it's also a disadvantage for New England for the exact same reason. And, yeah, I understand that Bruce Arena would be totally fine to play tactically in a knockout game on the road. But I think New England's way better going forward with Bowe and Bunbury and Heel and trying to attack. I think they're better that way. I don't know if they're necessarily set up to be a bunkering team. So, I mean, we'll see. Again, I mean, I'd rather roll the dice with back-to-backs against New England than play Red Bulls or Toronto in a one-game knockout. I really strongly feel that way. I would feel much better playing against New England than seeing Toronto, who always seems to find ways to come up with draws against you, right? Or play Red Bulls, who you've only beaten once ever in a lot of meetings. Atlanta United has played New England after an international break this year on the road and smoked them. Now, that was a long time ago. That's before Gustavo Bowe got there to New England. It's before Bruce Arena got there. But if you're asking me what would I prefer the most of the options on the table, it's still to play New England for the second time in 3 weeks. I feel very, very strongly about that.
And then, Mike, when you look at the lineup that was put out there by Atlanta United in Montreal, looking at things from a defensive standpoint, you saw Michael Parkhurst out there. Obviously, he was frustrated that he couldn't go a full 90 because he started cramping up. And you saw Jeff Lorenowitz out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the word that popped into my head as I was watching the match from locally, as the two of you were there in person, but just the presentation for me seemed it was a lot calmer out there with the two of them as a part of the 11.
That's your playoff lineup, I really think. Rometty might have a role, I'm not sure. But I think that is your safest, most veteran, poised lineup that you can put out there. And when you're in a one-game knockout, I'm sorry, you need safety and poise. And you need to have the ability to drag out a 1-0 win as opposed to getting to a track meet with teams. Well, I think Parkhurst and Lorenowitz out there give you that opportunity. So that's the way I would go. It's nothing against Franco Escobar. It's nothing against Eric Rometty. I think they can have roles off the bench. I think they can have spot roles as starters. But the one thing that felt like it was really missing to me Wednesday at Yankee Stadium, there was just kind of this leadership vacuum. There was a void out there. And Brad Guzan did the best he could wearing the armband. But you need to have some outfield players who can just be settlers, people that can bring some calm to the game. Parkhurst and Lorenowitz are those guys, and I think that's what you need to lean on in the playoffs. And I think Parkhurst, for the most part, proved his fitness. He did start cramping at the very, very end, but I think he proved his fitness. I think he proved that he could give you 90. That's obviously not a concern with Lorenowitz at all. You're going to get a big 2-week break between this New England match coming up, on Sunday, and then maybe playing them again either on the 19th or whenever, and that's a little uncertain now, I'm told. So you'll be in a good spot. You'll be in a really, really good spot with Parkhurst and Lorenowitz, and I that would be the way I would go.
Yeah, I think Montreal was a preview of, if not the exact lineup, the approach. And it was definitely more calculated. It was more conservative. It looked like a playoff team. It looked like a playoff approach because we've seen it through 2 years now in the postseason. The games get tighter. The games get, there's less margin for error. One mistake can end the season. And we've seen a lot of mistakes in the games before Montreal. We didn't see too many in Montreal.
Right. Yeah, I honestly, Jason, I think the bigger lineup question, I feel secure about this Parkhurst-Lorenowitz situation that John asked me about. I think the bigger question is, what are you going to do in the midfield when Barco comes back to 90 minutes health? And what is Hyndman's role in all this? Because I don't want to take Hyndman out of this mix right now. I think Hyndman has played extremely well lately. And is this going to become a Barco or Miram discussion?
No, I don't think so. Barco can't play out wide in that role. I think he becomes the odd man out. And it's a shame because he has played very well. But if you're going to get more defensive, I think your best chances to find goals are going to come from Barco, Pitti, and Joseph as a trio.
Agree. Yeah.
And that means Hyndman is left out and off the bench. But also what that means is you never know how these games can go. That means you're coming into, a second half, and if you need something, you've got Escobar, who can give you speed in the back or give you a stronger defender at right wing back. You've got Remedi, who can give you range and effort and grit in the midfield. And you've got Hyndman, who can give you an extra bit of class going forward if you have to change it up and go find something. So you've got lots of options off the bench to change the game in whichever way you need to change it.
Which you might have to do, especially against a team that would potentially bunker against you at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So it's a good situation to be in, but it's going to make Frank DeBoer's job a little bit tricky. But again, I think some of the guys up in New York have tried to kind of set the stage for Bruce Arena to execute this tactical masterclass against Frank DeBoer, if that is what the playoff matchup ends up being. Frank DeBoer is, I'll roll the dice with him any day against.
He ain't
Bruce
chopped
Arena.
liver now.
No, I mean Frank DeBoer has managed in just as many important matches as Bruce Arena. I mean, I know he hasn't managed in a World Cup, but I mean, he's been a manager in Champions League. He's managed in a bunch of trophy games. I'll roll the dice with that. I think it's going to be a great tactical matchup. I don't think it's any kind of a mismatch in favor of Bruce Arena. Again, the guys in New York, I had to chuckle. They're sending out these tweets about how, Matt Turner is the hottest goalkeeper in MLS, and Gustavo Bo, Teal Bunbury, and Carlos Gil are the most dangerous attacking trio in MLS, and
that one is the one.
And it sets the stage for all this intrigue in a one-game play. I know what you're doing. And the sad thing to me is if Atlanta United ends up playing them in the postseason and beats them, then, Atlanta United's not going to get any of the credit because, they should have beaten New England. I just have to chuckle sometimes because, look, I mean, I respect what New England has done under Bruce Arena. They're good. It's going to be a tough out, but you're crazy if you think that Atlanta United would not be the favorite at Mercedes-Benz Stadium going into a one-game knockout against New England Revolution. That's nuts. No odds maker in Las Vegas would even tempt that idea. Again, I mean, I'm not trying to be brash or cocky or anything, but I'm very, very confident in how Atlanta United would match up in a one-game knockout against them if it ends up going that way, and it might not. I was looking, to use a John word, at the permutations yesterday. If it's not going to be New England, the chances are actually, the probabilities, excuse me, not the chances. The mathematical probabilities are higher that you would play Red Bulls in a 3-6 game as opposed to Toronto. That's not good.
But, and this is the most important thing about that, you control that. You 100% control if that happens or not.
Absolutely, you do control.
You don't want to see Red Bulls? Don't lose to New England on decision day, flat out.
But guy, I mean, John and Jason, I'll ask you, who would you rather play in a one-game knockout? New England, who you just played on decision day, or Red Bulls? It's not a question, right?
It's not New England. It's not even a question. I agree with Jeff in that you don't want to do it. You don't ever want to be in that situation. You don't like it. But you take the other options, and yeah, there's no question. New England is 7th for a reason. They're not the best team in the East. They haven't been the best team in the East. They're there for a point. And then the flip side is when you talk about our friends from New York, they're not talking about Atlanta United like they're the ones that could be number 2. They're talking about Atlanta like they're 7th. They're not.
Yeah.
That's a big difference here.
And I was amused again at the power rankings that came out. Atlanta 4th, which I don't necessarily have an argument against, but dropping them below a Loons team that they've beaten twice this year, I do have an issue with that. But again, power rankings, they don't mean anything.
Yeah.
If you would have had Philadelphia over Atlanta, okay, I'm good. I can't argue that. If you're going to put Minnesota over them, I do have an issue with that. Again, it's one of those things where, they got a result against LAFC, so we're going to freak out about that because LAFC is the greatest thing since wheat toast, according to some up there, and they're going to be the greatest team in history. They're the shiny object.
No,
exactly.
But I'll give you this though, and this I've said this week, and I'm really believing it at this point. If LAFC doesn't get to MLS Cup final, I think the most likely team out of the West is Minnesota.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah.
I think they're the most complete team, and I think that draw gives them the belief that they can do it. Against LAFC, Minnesota is, let's see, they've lost one time. They had won 3 in a row coming into this one, and they get the draw in this one. So
I just think it's very important for Minnesota to get the number 2 seed, and they aren't home yet for that. And if they're the number 3 seed, I'm not in love with their chances to get to the West final because you would have to go to Seattle, probably. And
Seattle, it all depends on Nicholas Ladero.
Right.
If Ladero is healthy and playing well, Seattle can get to the Cup final. If he's not, they're not getting anywhere. They're such a one-man team. They're not going anywhere if Ladero is not influential.
Yeah, no, I agree. But, I mean, if Loons win on Sunday and get the number 2 seed, yes, you would really like their odds. The really interesting thing about Sunday, when you mention LAFC, they're home. If they win, they're going to play for something now because they're playing for 72 points, which would be the record. So that is an incentive. It's not like Bob Bradley could just rest everyone. They have nothing to play for, even though they've secured the Shield. I mean, they are going for a record. But boy, oh boy, if Colorado were to go in there and get a win, and then, San Jose, Seattle plays out a certain way, and you could be looking at the Rapids making the playoffs on decision day out of absolutely nowhere and doing so with a win over LAFC. Who in a million years would have predicted that scenario even a couple weeks ago?
Might be the most surprising thing to ever happen in MLS history.
But I have it. Look, LAFC has one win in their last 7, I think. 1 win in their last 7.
Correct.
They've had a lot of draws, but 1 win in their last 7. Colorado with some momentum. I mean, again, 6-7 weeks ago, you're seeing articles about LAFC being the greatest MLS team in history and who's going to be the next LAFC, even though they hadn't won a trophy at that point. and now you're thinking, Colorado actually has a chance to go into LAFC and get a decision day win and make the playoffs? No way. Odds would have been 500 to 1 on that a couple weeks ago, and it's still going to be really tough, and they need help, but it is possible, and that's I think the most intriguing storyline, along with that San Jose Portland match. Those are the two really intriguing storylines coming into Sunday that I know we'll talk about later this week. But it's just crazy how things can turn on a dime very, very quickly in this league.
Yeah, you mentioned the West, and then there's always in the East, there are those sandwich clubs. You're looking at DC and Toronto and Red Bulls and all that. I mean, it's going to be you have the groups in the East as well that are trying to sort themselves out. What do you see when you look at 3, 4, 5, 6?
I mean, 3.
Okay, 4, 5, 6. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, because again, I'm not like banking on Atlanta United winning on Sunday. I would not be shocked at all if it were a draw. And then that puts Philadelphia in play. And New York City really doesn't have a lot to play for, though I think they would be well served to get some of these injured guys a little bit of work before they go into their break. But as far as 4, 5, 6 is concerned, DC obviously is in the driver's seat for 4 because don't they play Cincinnati this weekend?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, even without Rooney, DC should be fine. Toronto Red Bulls. It's going to get really, really interesting. Red Bulls go to Montreal. Impact, you would think they have nothing to play for, but Wilmer Cabrera might be managing for his job. Yeah. If you read that Sam Stagecall piece this week, I mean, it seems like Joey Saputo has that team on a little bit of a knife's edge right now as far as, whether all of them are going to be back next year or not. So I think they'll be motivated, and I think we saw that Montreal can be very difficult to play on the road, even though I thought Atlanta United outplayed them. So then it kind of all comes down to Toronto, and they play Chicago, don't they? I don't have it in front of me. I think DC is good for the 4. Like I said, I was working on the probabilities yesterday, and the probability, again, not the chances, but the probability of Atlanta United seeing Red Bulls in a draw or loss situation on Sunday is actually pretty high. We'll go through it again on Friday, but I think if you're an Atlanta United fan, you would really, really like to see Red Bulls maybe drop all 3 at Montreal and hopefully avoid that situation. But we'll get into that more on Friday.
Even more so, you handle what you can control. You want to see Atlanta win on Sunday, flat out.
Sure.
That's how you take care of business.
And I think you need a little bit of positivity going into the postseason, too. September was an okay month, not a good month, an okay month. You won 2, you lost 2, and you had a draw. And I'll count the San Jose game because you got the game winner without Joseph. So without Joseph, basically you're 1-1-1. You scored 4 goals in 200 minutes. Not bad, not great. Now you're getting Joseph back, but you need something positive. This team's wobbling a little bit. It's explainable. I don't think they're in a bad run right now. They're just wobbling. But it's explainable when you take Joseph and Barco out of the mix. The Columbus result was the most baffling of all, but is it really when you look at how well Columbus has played lately?
No, it's not.
Talk to Philadelphia Union about how hard it is to play Columbus these days. So, you took care of business in Cincinnati and outplayed them. You did what you needed to do against San Jose. You got whooped by New York City. That was an embarrassment. I thought you played really well in Montreal, played well enough to win. I feel optimistic after that match, but you got to build on that now. And I think you're right, Jason. I mean, if you go into the postseason having earned 1 or 2 points out of a possible 9 in your final 3 matches, that's not a good feeling. Then you got 2 weeks to stew on that. That's not good either. And I don't think you want to end the regular season the way you did last year. I mean, that created a lot of negativity for a couple weeks that, again, you had to stew on before you came back and played really well against New York City.
Yeah,
so
luckily last year you didn't have 2 weeks. I think that's what makes a win on Sunday even more important, because you talk about stewing. I mean, it felt like a stew last year, and it was just a week. You get into this situation where you have the international break. We'll see if players get called up to games that the club can't say no to. And Miles Robinson and Brad Kazan would be the 2 that could be called up for CONCACAF Nations League games. And if they're called up, they're obligated to go.
Yeah.
And that's not exactly what you love, but that's where you're at. And if you have that going on, you come in after a loss, you come in after I would push back on the wobbling comment. I would say they wobbled out of Yankee Stadium. I felt much better after Montreal. I felt like they were in much more control in Montreal, and that's what was scary about Yankee Stadium was the lack of control.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they controlled the match. I'd say they were the better team on Sunday, but they still didn't get 3 points. And ultimately, what it comes down to is you didn't get 3 points because you lost a 1v1 matchup in the 80th minute. Well, the margin for error can't be that narrow. You had a couple opportunities to put a second goal in there. Diop at the end obviously was a big part of it. So, I mean, yeah, you're right, Jason. It's one thing to control and be better and be the better team. Atlanta United absolutely was on Sunday, and that's why I am optimistic. But, in a one-game knockout, if you have a chip that goes over the crossbar here and a big diving save there and a defender falls down here and suddenly it's 1-1 and now you blink, you're going to penalties, that's not good. You need to play better so you have a little more of a cushion, a bigger margin for error. And that's something that is going to be very, very important for Atlanta United over these next two matches.
Yeah, winning at home and controlling your own destiny to as much of an extent as you can and getting that number 2 before you have to see if everybody wins out a New York City team, potentially at Citi Field, maybe at Yankee Stadium. Who knows? Depends on how the Yankees do. You need this win on Sunday. I think it's a really important match.
I think it's the biggest match they've played since the U.S. Open Cup final, and probably one of the top 5 most important matches they'll play all year. Because the difference between second and third is enormous in this format. Hugely important. Do you like Atlanta United's chances to beat Red Bulls and then go to Philadelphia and beat them? Or, as opposed to staying home, playing New England, and then maybe beating Philadelphia at home?
Very different road.
A very, very different road, dramatically different. And as you said, Jason, you have control of this. You have control. You've got to go out and see it out. You've never lost to New England. You do have one draw against them all time, but you've never lost to them. Got to find a way to get 3. One's not enough. Got to get 3. They have the control to do so, and getting Joseph back, even if it's for only 30 minutes, is going to be a big, I think, emotional lift for this team. So I feel like they're in good shape.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I feel better after Montreal, and now you have to build on that and convert your chances and eliminate the 1v1 individual breakdowns that have cost you from time to time and take care of business, because it's right there for you to get that number 2 spot and have a much easier road back to MLS Cup. Nothing's easy in this format, but you want to make it as easy as possible. I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit about this on Stoppage Time this afternoon.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll see you at 2 p.m. on the 92.9 The Game Facebook page. And it feels like this is going to be a long road to Sunday, doesn't it?
Yeah. I want to get the game going now. I want to play tonight.
I want my
Let's
midweek match. I just want someone to play tonight. Someone. I know CONCACAF League's going on tonight. Maybe I'll watch that. But just feels like there's a void in my life with no midweek soccer this week.
Big Copa Libertadores semifinal tonight with Grêmio and Flamengo from Brazil.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
Or we can watch the Diego Maradona documentary, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, the trailer looks great. See, there you go.
Highly recommended.
My night is figured out now. Sounds good.
That's what we're here for, Mike.
All right, guys.
We'll see you later this afternoon.
See you.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll get back into the Wall Pass Wednesday right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm going to let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Wall Pass Wednesday, SDH, October 2nd. We've got Wall Pass Wednesday questions, comments from you guys on Twitter. We will get to CONCACAF League was brought up, and last night we saw Saprissa earn their spot into the CONCACAF Champions League. They defeated Independiente of Panama in the quarterfinals. It appears Independiente will be okay to also reach the CONCACAF Champions League. The two teams that and this is all trying to decipher CONCACAF, which can get you in trouble sometimes. It appears the two lowest ranked teams that would be the odd teams out of the finalists for the Champions League are Waterhouse and San Carlos. If they win their quarterfinals, and Waterhouse has the second leg tonight, if they win, then they would get in. If they don't, they would be out. Waterhouse has to go to Motagua. They lost 2-0 in the home leg. They're pretty much done. So I'm not expecting Waterhouse to get into the CONCACAF Champions League. Sorry, John. I know you were hoping for Waterhouse and a draw in the Champions League and a trip to Jamaica.
Well, but we still got Portmore, chance.
Yeah, they're still in. San Carlos lost the away leg 2-0 to Alianza, so they get Alianza in Costa Rica tomorrow. And then the other one is Olimpia and Comunicaciones. Both should be in, we think. But if San Carlos or Waterhouse pulls a miracle, if they are able to overturn it, then you're going to the next teams that are ranked. And the rankings are not 100% clear, so that's why we're not exactly sure. Independiente is the one that is next, it looks like, that could fall out of it if San Carlos or Waterhouse claim a spot.
Yeah, Olimpia won the first leg 2-0. Same with Alianza over San Carlos. Like I said, that's tomorrow. Tonight it's Motagua and Waterhouse. It's a 10 o'clock kick, so it'll be a late start. But for those keeping an eye on possible road trips, come Champions League in February, this is where you're heading.
Yep, CONCACAF League quarterfinals will wrap up tomorrow. It's looking like the teams you would expect that get in. I think San Carlos has a shot. They've got to overturn a 2-0 deficit. They are at home. It's possible, but this is a team who hasn't really been in this situation in CONCACAF play ever. So, do they have that in them? We'll find out.
And, yeah, so I know what I'll be watching tonight and tomorrow just to kind of keep an eye on things. So I will leave it to you and to Mike to give me reports on the Maradona documentary until I can figure out a way to watch it in some aspect that doesn't have to do with purchasing a network for a while.
Already told you. Free trial. HBO Now. That's technology, though. It might be difficult for you.
Yes, agreed. I will stipulate to that. I always will.
It's not hard, but it might be difficult for you. Just saying.
Yes. Right there with you.
It requires an app or going to a website and setting up a free trial. We'll see how this goes. I'm assuming it probably won't happen.
Might just end up getting HBO on the cable all over again.
I had to think during the last segment about the player that would be the better replacement for Miguel Almiron in transition and that type of role. I think instead of Pelé, Michael Laudrup, Danish legend who played a lot in that kind of role, a lot of speed, and he would be somewhat of... He's not as fast as Miguel, I don't think, at his prime, but you get a teenage Michael Laudrup. I mean, this is a guy who played at Juve, Lazio, Barca, Real Madrid, ended his career at Ajax, just an unbelievable player for Denmark. Yeah, I think he would be the one that I would go with. A teenage Michael Laudrup would be my replacement for Miguel Almiron.
And we've got folks with Twitters and thoughts and things, since it is a Wall Pass Wednesday.
Let's do it.
All right, Caleb Cook had a question having to do with the release of the Nations League roster, wondering what best and worst case scenarios would be. Pablo Maurer did have one piece of news. Sergino Dest is not in the picture for the roster, and he's curious to see how that's explained. But Caleb wanted to know best and worst case scenarios for the roster.
Yeah, the situation with Dest is it sounds like he is keeping his options open when it comes to playing for the Netherlands, which is bad news for the U.S. Nothing definite, but that's not a great situation, and I will be curious to see how it's explained. Did they just not call him up, or did he refuse the call up? Did he say, I'm not coming, I want to keep my options open? That's a big difference. Brandon Aronson from Philadelphia, it sounds like is being called up. That makes you think maybe you'll see a few more new faces. Best and worst case scenario, it's so hard. I mean, you're playing Canada and Cuba. These are two matches you should win, and you should be fine to take care of business in. It shouldn't be something you're afraid of. You should be able to bring a few new folks into the mix. I wonder about what they do at center back. I wonder if Miles Robinson is called in and if he is a first choice in playing. It feels like games that he should get. It really does. It's not, again, the greatest timing when it comes to playoffs in Atlanta United, and you'd like to have that break and just be ready for the postseason. But this would be a big opportunity for him to cement himself in that back line. I think he's had a better season than Aaron Long. I think he should be getting that call instead of Long or Walker Zimmerman, and not just getting the call, but getting the time. And that's something that I think should happen here, and I'd like to see it. Even with the playoffs looming, that's one I'd like to see, because these are games, again, these aren't friendlies. So these are games that if you're a player who refuses the call-up, that's a different situation than the club refusing the call-up. The club cannot refuse the call-up in official matches. The player can. It probably means they're not going to get called up again. And Miles isn't going to do that at this point in his career. He can't. You can't do that. So you're going to take it, and you're going to hope that maybe he plays the first game and doesn't play the second and comes back early. That would be the ideal scenario. I would like to see a couple new faces in the lineup more than anything. I'd like to see Aronson get a little bit of time. I'd like to see what they're going to do up top when it comes to Josie Altidore and Josh Sargent. I think you really need to bring Christian Pulisic in and play him because he's not getting time at Chelsea. He needs games. So nothing really massively surprising I'm looking towards with this U.S. roster that we should be getting any time. I guess the only other one for me would be, is there a competition for goalkeeper? Is Zach Steffen still the guy, no questions asked, or does Brad Gazan have a shot? Does Sean Johnson have a shot? Is it where you might see this surprise. Matt Turner, for example. That name's been bandied around a little bit.
Hottest keeper in MLS.
He's been really good. That's not a knock. I mean, no, he's been very, very good. There's nothing to diminish that at all. There shouldn't be. Is he worthy of a call-up? Maybe. It just depends on the direction you want to go. If it's an open competition, it should be. And he probably should get a look sometime over the next 6 months. I wouldn't give him a look in these games that mean something. I would be turning to Brad Kazan if I'm not 100% sold on Zach Steffen, and I think Brad should be the guy anyway. I've been consistent with that. I think he's earned it.
Jorge B., discussing the international break, says last time we had an international break, the team not only lost the game but struggled and looked rusty. Is it a good idea to have a 2-week break for the playoffs?
There's nothing you can do. I mean, is it a good idea? No, it's not. It's a bad idea, but that's the structure the league went with. Now, you're a little bit, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you've got the November break as well, and we've always criticized the break in the middle of the playoffs, which is really bad. I hated that. So now you are ending your season, you have a break, then you come back and you're straight into knockouts. I don't love the knockout situation. For me, the best way to mitigate all of it would be the 2 legs, but then you're probably going to need to go down to 4 teams from each conference making it instead of 7. I don't think that's where the league wants to go either. So you're kind of just stuck. You have to try to figure out a way, and it will be different this time. Last time, remember, you were coming after 15 matches in 2 months. You needed not just the break that you had, but you needed to get away. Like, you needed to go on a vacation and not train for multiple days. I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think when you're looking at this break, you might get an extra day off. You might throw an extra regen day, a fitness day, what have you. But it's not going to be the extended break that we saw in September where you come back and you're rusty. I think you're going to be doing everything possible to mitigate rust and keep the intensity up in training sessions. And it's just different. I mean, you're coming back for a playoff game instead of coming back for a regular season game. Different mentality, and I think it will have a very different feel to it. I don't expect to see guys away for 3, 4, 5 days during the break. I think it might be a day here, a day there, but everything will be geared towards playing in the postseason when everybody's back.
John Nason with a question. He says, what do you think that Frank DeBoer learned from his first time at Yankee Stadium or Citi Field? Googly eyes emoji. That'll serve the team well on a possible return in the playoffs.
I think it's the same things Tata Martino learned. Go back to 2017. First game there was maybe one of the worst Atlanta performances in the club's history, losing 3-1 at Yankee Stadium. This one was worse than that. So you learn. In 2018 regular season, you're talking about a game that went 1-1, and Atlanta had the lead until late. They were more defensive than they were the first time around. Then you take it to the postseason game at Yankee Stadium, and you're even more defensive. So I think you're going to be more of what we saw in Montreal. I think you're going to be more of a line of 5. Maybe you go to a 4-3-3 that sits deeper instead of a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3 that turns into a line of 5. Maybe. But I think you are going to have more numbers behind the ball. That's the number one thing you learn from playing there. And it's just it's very difficult. It's very difficult to go in there and play the style that Atlanta wants to play. So you have to adjust and you have to do something different. And you have to experience it, I think, to truly understand it.
When we got into the discussion this morning about where MLS sits as a league in the world landscape, Daniel Price says the biggest thing I want from MLS is parity. The EPL may be the best league, but it's very top-heavy. I want continued growth and continued emphasis on parity. There'll always be better teams, but I want there to be upsets and storylines.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing because all the leagues that are the biggest in the world are top-heavy. England is probably a little less top-heavy. Germany is Bayern Munich, flat out. Spain, generally it's a trio. It's Barca, it's Real Madrid. Atletico Madrid has broken into that consistently. I think you can count them in that now. Italy, it's Juve, although Inter is looking really good to challenge them for a long time in the league this season. France, it's PSG. It is what it is. Like, those teams are the best because they have the money. It's not parity. It is dominant by a small number of teams. MLS has tried to be different from day one with the structure to give everybody a chance. The playoffs do that to a degree, but the structure also makes it difficult for teams to be powerhouses year after year. Now, the NFL has that structure, and the New England Patriots have been able to be around the top of the league every year since, 2002?
Yeah.
Which is incredible, because that's not supposed to happen. But they do it through, what would you say the reason they get there? It's smart player evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you obviously have a superstar quarterback, and that's very unique to football, but they get the most out of seemingly every player that they bring in, with the exception of 84 that just came in. I don't think you wore 84 there, but anyway.
But no, what you have with the Patriots is a team that has built a system around understanding the salary cap, players who know that the coaching staff has a system in place that has proven itself to be a successful one, winning the last game of the year 6 times. And you have players that want to be a part of that, and they buy into the system, understanding that at the same time they may not be making what they would be making in other places, but at the end of the day, do you want a ring on your finger, or do you want to make a boatload of money? And you have a scouting system where they find guys who can do multiple things and can be effective across the board, going back to a Troy Brown, who could be a wide receiver, and then in a pinch, they could use him as a defensive back. Matthew Slater, who could be a wide receiver, could be a running back, could be a slot back, could be a returner. And when you do bring in those troubled individuals, Corey Dillon, Randy Moss, etc., there is a distinct understanding that you will straighten up and you will fly right. We might take a little bit of who you are. You're allowed to be a little bit of your personality, but right now you're a part of the collective. I mean, it's Borg football, basically. You will toe the company line. You will do what you're supposed to do. And if you don't, then you're out of here. You saw with Corey Dillon, his troubled time in Cincinnati, goes into New England, wins the Super Bowl. Randy Moss, his past was well chronicled. He goes into New England. He does what he does. And you also have veterans like a Tom Brady and other veterans along the line, defense, special teams, what have you, who will sit there and they will be the self-policers of what's going on with the roster itself, to where they know what the coaches expect. The veterans will sit there and go, okay, this is what the coaches expect. Do not step out of line, or we will self-police and make sure that you either step back in line or you will not be a part of what's going on. And so when you have all of this collective working together, whether it's scouting and finding guys who are high-round draft picks and bringing them in, free agents who were coming from Mid-American Conference places like a Julian Edelman, and we've seen what he's been able to do. It has been a top-down approach of success no matter where you turned in Foxborough, and you've seen the results over the last 2 decades, which is stunning to think about.
And they've run against the idea of parity. They're dominant in a parity world. And I think there's things to learn from that they've done that MLS teams can emulate to a degree in order to do that. And that's why I do push against like the idea that, well, you can't have super teams in that scenario. You can. You absolutely can. I think it's harder. It's far more difficult than if you could just spend whatever you want and just buy the best and be the best, which doesn't guarantee success either. And we've seen that many times too. Look at Real Madrid right now. It happens, but you've got a situation with MLS that I agree with Daniel. I think it's something unique, and I think it's a good thing for, to go into this weekend, final weekend of the regular season, looking ahead to the postseason. Colorado still has a chance to get into the playoffs. You have a great match and a great spectacle in Portland, where the San Jose Earthquakes go in, having in MLS era Quakes and Timbers, having never won in Portland, going to old school NASL era. The last time they won a league match was in 1982 in Portland.
Uh-huh.
And they've got to go in and take care of business to get into the postseason. That's a great spectacle. That's a great decision day match to follow. You've got positioning battles that are very important. A lot of people kind of get into this where there's nothing on the line. And yeah, there is. I mean, if Atlanta finishes third, we just went through it with Mike Conti. It is a completely and utterly different road if you are second and you're going to play New England and then host probably Philadelphia, but could be if somebody upsets Philadelphia, and then going to NYC if they advance through. That's a very different road than being third and hosting Toronto or Red Bulls, and then, if favorites win, going to Philadelphia in the semifinals of the conference. That's an entirely different road. So, yeah, it's a very important decision day. Those are the good things about MLS. And just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. I like what Liga MX has with their playoffs. I think there's a lot of drama there. I think MLS can learn from it. I think the structure's better, and I hope they do learn from it eventually. But playoffs can be good. Parity can be good. Having multiple opportunities for different winners is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Buying City FC on the hashtag Wallpass Wednesday. Who are the defending MLS Cup champions? This is about proving. I think so. Yeah. It's about proving who. This is about proving who is the coolest club in the country. I hope the fans plan on going off. No one knows what this Atlanta United squad is going to do because no one has seen them. Everyone is back.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's something that I kind of felt coming out of Montreal. If you told me that Atlanta United, because I've always felt like Joseph Martinez would play in the postseason. Once we saw him on the treadmill with the whatever G device, I'm like, all right, he's going to play in the postseason. Is he going to be 100%? Well, we don't know. But is he going to play? Yeah, he's going to play. So wasn't worried about that. But if you told me that Atlanta runs the table, wins MLS Cup, not going to be surprised by it. If you told me that they got knocked out in the first game in a game, say it's New England, say it's Toronto, say it's Red Bulls, where they get 20 shots, 5 saves against them, you give up 1 goal on a counter and you lose 1-0, or you lose an extra time or whatever, that wouldn't shock me either. I think the Eastern Conference is very wide open. I don't know what's going to happen. I think Atlanta has as good a shot as anybody in the East, including NYC and Philadelphia. I really do think they have that. They've got to be better, and they've got to, as the question was earlier, you've got to learn from that loss at Yankee Stadium, not repeat the mistakes that happened there. You got to get Joseph scoring goals, obviously, and you've got to find that balance between getting numbers forward, creating opportunities, and being defensively secure. At this time of year, you've got to be defensively secure. So you've got to find the balance. And if this team can find that balance, they can win MLS Cup.
JC Hillis with a question. Are we going to have a functional left fullback available during the playoffs to provide some tactical flexibility with Bello and Ambrose as question marks?
You're not playing with a left fullback, so I don't think it even matters at this point. I don't see them going away from 3 center backs. So you're not going to have Bello because Bello's going to go to the U17 World Cup. And I think that decision has already been made, which is probably the best one for him at this point. you've had Ambrose. You could have turned to Ambrose if you wanted to play 4 in the back. He's been available for a while, and he's played for Atlanta United too for a little while. And you're able to get, I think, more talent on the field in a 3-5-2, or if it turns into a 3-4-3, however you want to call it, or 3-4-2-1. You're able to get more talented players on the field that way. And that's been how this team has looked its best since, the summertime. They did play in a 4-3-3 earlier in the year and had lots of success with it. And I think they were more defensively secure there. And that sometimes saw Michael Parkhurst playing left back. And he was fine in that role, in that way of playing. Because you aren't asking him to bomb forward and play like a wing back. This is where you have to talk about it in the context of the two different shapes. Because what Justin Merrim does in the 3-5-2 is a very different thing than what Michael Parkhurst did in the 4-3-3 when he played left back. Like, different worlds. It's not the same formation. It's not the same position. So you can't even really compare them. I don't think you go back to a 4-man backline. I just don't. And if you do, I think you're going to do it in the context of what we saw previously in that 4-3-3, where your left back is honestly nominally a center back, and they're going to stay home for the most part.
John Roper on the hashtag Wallpass Wednesday, what is the average retirement age for an MLS player? Mid-30s?
That's a good question. I don't know the best way to answer it, honestly, because I think you've had recently not a large number, but you've had some younger players retire, guys who were not quite going to break through into the bigger money. And I think the unique element about soccer in the United States versus other countries is you do get a lot of college-educated players and a lot of guys who have other job opportunities. And Brandon Vincent from Chicago was a prime example. He was a left back who was borderline U.S. national team level, like probably not a regular, but could have seen some caps. Could have played for 15 years in MLS if he stayed healthy and made solid money. But he decided to leave and take a job outside of soccer. That's a really unique element that we don't see in other sports or in soccer in other countries. That college-educated American player that elects to call a day on their career at an earlier age. I would say on the whole, even with those factored in, the average age, retirement age, like not leaving the league but retiring from the game, is mid-30s. Actually, I don't know if that's truly the average. I think that's where it gets weird with all the different situations. But the guys who retire from MLS, the guys who don't like drop down and play a year in the second division or go chase a contract overseas to keep going, it's usually 33 to 36, somewhere in that ballpark.
And we're caught up on Twitter, but since you mentioned retirements, Tyler Ruthven hung it up.
Yeah, Tyler Ruthven came back last year to join Atlanta United too, and played sparingly this year. He's had a number of injuries. It's been tricky for him. This is a local guy who played youth with Tony Annan throughout his youth career. Played for the Silverbacks as a professional, started there, went to the New York Red Bulls. I honestly thought he got kind of a raw deal at New York because he played well in his time when he did get on the field with the Red Bulls. Went to Scandinavia, came back and played with Miami, had a lot of success with Miami FC in the North American Soccer League, and came back home to finish it out as he knew like his time was kind of coming to an end as an active player. He's been a really important element to Atlanta United too, and an element that I think gets overlooked when we talk about a reserve team and a second team and what it means and what their function is and what their job is. Ruthven is a guy who had more value to be at Atlanta United too than he would have at like a Birmingham Legion or somewhere else, because he's there to be a foundational piece. And he's there to be a guy who, forms a bit of the backbone of the club, but also is that role model for the young players coming through. And you could hear it in things that he would say about George Campbell after a match when he would play next to him and be like almost talking Campbell through the game and marshaling him along in that match. You could hear it in Tyler's voice, how proud he was of George. And I think the thing that gets lost is how proud Atlanta United fans should be of Tyler in that situation. Because not every veteran can grasp that role. Not every veteran can accept that kind of role. But you have to have them in clubs like this. And it's something that not enough clubs around the country think about when you're developing a second team. It's not just putting a bunch of good young players on the field together and throwing them out there and seeing what happens. It's not just going out and getting a random group of guys, filling in with a couple second division veterans to play and just going to play. You have to think about it. You have to add guys like Ruthven, Jack Metcalf, who does a lot of this stuff as well, younger player than Tyler, but one of the veterans of that group. You have to have the right foundational pieces. And they know that their time in a second team club might not be a long time. It might be a short period of time, but you have to have them to help the young players along, and you have to have the right veteran players that want to help the young players along. That's the key here. I think Tyler knew that coming in. I don't know how much of a direct impact he had on Miles Robinson, but I think he did last season with Atlanta United too, because they played together towards the end of the season a little bit. And he's had a huge impact on George Campbell. He's had a huge impact on Garrison Tubbs. He's had a huge impact on Wesley Dacus, Lawrence Wyke. A lot of young, talented players for Atlanta United, too, that Tyler Ruthven, being part of it, being part of the training sessions, being part of the group dynamic, pulling them aside, talking about things they can work on, talking about things they can be better at, talking about what it's like to be in the places that Tyler's been in. You need those guys. And Tyler Ruthven coming back and finishing his career here in Atlanta, it was the perfect fit for him. A very good center back, one of those guys who, because he didn't play a ton at the top level, isn't going to be talked about a lot, but a guy who's really grown up along the way as a professional player and a guy who's had a huge impact in a short period of time in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's been... Yeah. I second everything that you said, but the mentoring thing is what will stick with me because, being able to see him with Atlanta United too, having him marshaling back there and instructing on the pitch in games, and the Garrison Tubbs example obviously is the one that sticks in as the most recent, but Tubbs and Campbell and everyone back there that he's been able to talk through and aid and marshal and all that kind of stuff. It was good to see, and obviously this year being really rough with injuries, completely understandable, but just good to see him come home to wrap things up.
Yeah, it's key to have players like that, and I think it's helped everyone associated with the club. Stephen Glass had some really nice things to say about Tyler in the press release that came out from the club, and it's another one, not a surprise. The injuries have made it difficult for Tyler to get on the field a ton this year, but his role shouldn't be diminished. And when you see George Campbell make an MLS appearance here in the next few years, his homegrown deal, was earned this season, and a player like Tyler Ruthven had a big hand in getting him there. And I'm sure Tyler will be very happy to see George make his MLS debut here in the next year or two.
We are officially caught up on everything, sir. What does the day hold?
The day holds a trip to hang out on the midday show at 92.9 The Game with Andy and Randy at 1:20, and then I'll stick around for the AMA that can always go sideways, upside down, spin around until you fall out of the cart. You never know where the AMA is going to go on that show. It's always fun, though. After that, I'll head downstairs to the studio for stoppage time. It's at 2 o'clock. watch on Facebook.com/929thegame. And then at 5 o'clock, I'll be on the call with Jessica Sharman for Oglethorpe's women's team this afternoon. You can watch that on gopetrels.com at 5 o'clock, or you can come out to Brookhaven and watch some NCAA D3 women's soccer.
Go out to Brookhaven if you can.
Yeah, or watch.
It's good
Both
stuff.
are good.
Or watch. If you can make it, go watch. Good stuff.
It's going to be hot. It's going to be
True.
very hot.
Yes. So go to the opposite side of the field where Jason and Jessica will be calling the match from, because that is the shielded part with trees and apartments.
Yes, definitely. One thing before we go, Emerson Heineman spoke to Doug Robertson, as this just popped up on my Twitter timeline, about what's next for him. And remember, he's here on loan from Bournemouth. Heineman was asked about his future. He said, "It's tough to say right now. I've obviously enjoyed my time here for sure, and I kind of want to hold out and look at everything after everything's over and analyze everything. I think it's early to make a decision now, especially with all that's coming up and all the important games. I'll look over everything, but so far it's been great." I would be pretty surprised if he's not here next year. I think Emerson Heineman was scouted out and brought in because it's a long-term type of situation. Unless Bournemouth's position has changed and they're actually going to give him a true opportunity, I think it's better for him to get the time here in Atlanta. And he's been very, very good. Can't wait to see how that midfield is going to look here in the postseason, because you've got pretty much everyone healthy for Atlanta as you get into the decision day match and the postseason, and you're going to have a lot of options. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be fascinating for Frank DeBoer to figure out which grouping is going to be best. We'll talk more about that tomorrow on a Thursday Thoughts edition of the show. Keep chiming in with your teenagers that you would add to Atlanta United's team. Great question from Five Stripe Daily this morning. It was a lot of fun kind of thinking through that. I really like the Laudrup one now that I think about it, though. Laudrup and Rijkaard are the two that I keep coming back to that would be great teenagers to have to your team, but also fill a need. So chime in on that one at Soccer Down here. Let us know anything else you're thinking, and we'll bring it into tomorrow's show when we get started at 9 o'clock. Thanks, y'all. Much plati, y'all.
Much plati.